possibly even including the council's secretary. The battle damage assessment is ongoing, but Israel says they will continue strikes against Tehran and across the country of Iran. The Iranians responding with many missile strikes against Israel. One of those strikes was a cluster munition that exploded over Tel Aviv, Israel's second largest city. At one of the scenes in a community called Bnei Brak, there were thousands of people in the streets, families celebrating the Jewish holiday of Purim.
Today, President Donald Trump threatened to end trade with Spain, citing a lack of support over the U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran and the European nation's resistance to increasing its NATO spending. Trump told reporters during an Oval Office meeting with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz that we're going to cut off all trade with Spain. A retired naval officer whose ship was attacked by Islamic terrorists in 2000 says there is evidence that Iran provided material support to those responsible. More from AFN's Chad Groening.
Retired Navy Commander Kirk Lippold commanded the destroyer USS Cole when it was attacked by al-Qaeda terrorists while in port in Yemen in 2000. With reports of so much Iranian involvement in terrorist activity around the Middle East, was there a Cole connection?
To my knowledge, there is no direct connection to Iran. However, there is intel out there and court cases that over the years, Iran did provide material support to al-Qaeda for conducting those operations. Whether Cole was directly affected by that is unknown, but I know some of the families have taken Iran to court because of that and have won court cases.
Lippold says we must remember that Osama bin Laden was Sunni and the Iranians are Shia.
And there is a fundamental difference between those two religions, and they have gone to blows over the centuries. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend, so to speak. And so long as someone was going after the United States, it wouldn't surprise me if Iran was, in fact, helping al-Qaeda.
I'm Chad Groening.
The House Ethics Committee has opened an investigation into allegations that Republican Representative Nancy Mace overcharged a congressional program intended to help defray housing costs for lawmakers who have residences in Washington. Mace, a South Carolina Republican representative in her third House term, denies the allegations, decrying a partisan process and saying officials had ignored her rebuttal evidence. The organization known as Defending Education is applauding the U.S. Supreme Court. Justices have temporarily blocked a California law that prevents schools from notifying parents when their children want to go by the opposite sex and use different pronouns. Sarah Parshall-Perry of Defending Education says the law violates parental rights.
This is a very strong signal from the Supreme Court. My feeling is that they would not have weighed into an issue like this on an emergency basis unless they believed there was a serious risk of harm based on the policy's operation.
That's all our time for now. Find more at afm.net.
Join American Family Radio for Faith and Finance with Rob West.
As we think about the opportunity we have to steward God's resources, we realize that it's a high calling. It's an important responsibility, and our goal in that is simply faithfulness.
Rob brings biblical insight to a variety of financial topics. He's joined by special guests and experts in the field of finances. Faith and Finance with Rob West. Weekday mornings at 9 Central. Find the podcast at afr.net.
Darkness is not an affirmative force. It simply reoccupies the space vacated by the light.
This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
It should be uncomfortable for a believer to live as a hypocrite.
Delivering people out of the bondage of mainstream media and the philosophies of this world.
God has called you and me to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment. Let's not miss our moment.
And now, the Hamilton Corner.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hamilton Corner. My name is Abraham Hamilton III. I'm the host of the program, joined by the Corner Contingent. Right across from me, my man, 100 grand, Mr. Bobby Rosa is in the studio with us and in the screening room. Producer extraordinaire, often imitated, never duplicated, the real J Mac, ladies and gentlemen, is in the screening room. And Mr. Bunn is in the screening room. If you see us out on the road, you might see him.
He's everywhere. He's everywhere.
He truly. He might be in the Mossad. I don't know. CIA, Mossad. You might be pumping gas. He'll show up where you pumping gas.
Looking for that phone booth.
We're ready to rock and roll with today's edition of the program. At this very moment, many of you, if not most of you, are making your transitions from your part-time job, where you generate an income, to your full-time jobs, where you cultivate an outcome. And as you do so, I want to remind you to do so with intentionality, understanding the primacy that God places on the family, and allowing that to govern and guide your engagement in your home. Though we are in a state of war in our nation, I mean, that's just what it is. It still rings true that what goes on in your house is more important than what goes on in the White House, because you are directly responsible and accountable for the decisions you make in your home and for your families. The president is responsible for the decisions he makes in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, or if he does it from Pennsylvania Avenue extended in Mar-a-Lago. You and I are responsible for what goes on in our homes. And we cannot afford to allow the things that are happening nationally and internationally to divert our attentions to such a degree to where we are neglectful concerning the things that God has entrusted to our care. It is primary election day in the state of Texas. To all of our Texas listeners and viewers, I hope that you have or are making your way to cast your ballot if you have not done so already. It's a very important elections that are happening there. Let's see. I got something right here. Yes. It's vitally important for us to be engaged, and you want to be engaged exactly where you are. That's correct. So many things are swirling, man, right now. And I have several thoughts percolating all at once. We cannot afford to allow ourselves to be moved off of the basis that God has for us. Let us turn to the Word of God. Joshua chapter 24 is where we're going to go today. Joshua chapter 24. Verses 14 and 15 is where we're going to focus today at this part of the program. In Joshua chapter 23, you'll find that as Joshua really is preparing to will be off of the scene soon, he addresses the leadership in Israel in chapter 23. And then in chapter 24, he expands his address to the entire people, all the peoples of Israel. In fact, in chapter 24, verse 1, it literally says Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel. Versus chapter 23, he addressed the leadership in Israel. In addressing the tribes, all the tribes of Israel in chapter 24, it would seem as he had just led the people of Israel through what could only be described as just a miraculous campaign, really, in moving into the promised land. And you would think, I would think, some of the things that he said here would not have needed to be said. I would think surely not at this juncture, having witnessed all that you just experienced all that you just experienced, certainly there should be full persuasion, confidence, and resolution. But that was not the case. In chapter 24, the first, 13 verses or so, Joshua goes on to provide a bit of a history lesson. Explaining all the things that Yahweh had done for them and through them and provided for them. And then he comes to verse 14, and I want you to notice the specific references that are made there, because I believe they're instructive for us. Following the history lesson of showing all that God has done for them, even saying how the Lord has allowed you to inherit cities that you had not built. to eat the fruit of vineyards that you had not planted, olive yards that you had not planted, olive orchards, that you had not planted. And then look at verses 14 and 15. Joshua is continuing to speak. He says, Now therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and faithfulness. Well, some translations might say reverence and true devotion. Look at what he says next. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt. Beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now, many of us recall the very last phrase in verse 15, 24:15. Choose you this day who you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. But I don't want you to miss the context that profound declaration by Joshua is made. I don't want you to miss the context there. Remember, when Joshua is making this address, he's addressing the second generation of wilderness Israelites. These are people who have witnessed their immediate ancestors pass away in the wilderness. Remember, following the spies with the bad report, the only people who lived to enter the promised land, who were adults at that time over the particular age, were Joshua and Caleb. Remember? Everyone else, all of the other adults who are exceeded the particular age as identified in the scripture, they passed away in the wilderness. So you are talking to the second generation of people. Some of the people were born in the wilderness. Some of them were children, and they're now adults. But they have witnessed the pillar of cloud by day, witnessed the pillar of fire by night. They witnessed water coming from the rock in different sources. They've witnessed all of these various things. Yet, and in addition to that, these are the ones who also experienced when they crossed the Jordan for the very first time, and that is the river that is mentioned here. When they crossed the Jordan for the very first time, they witnessed, when they crossed the Jordan for the very, very first time, and they ate the fruit of the land in the promised land, the Bible says that the manna ceased. These people to whom Joshua is addressing experienced all of that. And it is to these people Joshua says, now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in reverence and true devotion, or in sincerity and faithfulness. It is to these people, Joshua says, put away the gods, lowercase g, that your father served beyond the river. Guys, this is not only talking about an idolatry that existed in Egypt. Joshua is talking about an idolatry that existed amongst the people of Israel prior to crossing the Jordan River. Think about that. Think about that. Think about, this is a people who they are post-Red Sea Exodus. They are post-seeing the Egyptians that were before you will see no more. They experienced that. Yet there was still a contingent who persisted in an idolatry that Joshua says, are y'all ready now, after we've had this amazing promised land conquest that we've experienced to date? Are you ready now to put away the lowercase g's that your parents served before we crossed the Jordan River? Guys, that's a striking thing to consider. That is striking. How is this possible? With all that they've experienced, with Yahweh's provision and grace and potency and deliverance, and you still had some flirting with idolatry? This is what Joshua is pointing out. And he doesn't say it just once. Put away the lowercase g gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt. That's a time period that predates the Exodus. Put them away and serve the Lord. Verse 15. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods, lowercase g, that your fathers served in the region beyond the river. That's on the other side. On the other side of the Jordan River. Or the gods of the Amorites. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Guys, I'm pointing this out because it's very easy to be comfortable and familiar with the acts and the works of God to where we kind of ease into a comfortable idolatry of various sorts. In the 21st century, there's very few people in the United States of America who are worshiping Asherah poles and statues. But in many ways, man, we have relative idols who snuff out the vitality of our Christ following. It is not natural to fallen Adam to be devoted to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. That is not natural. Which is why we must be intentional. The Apostle Paul said to Timothy, train oneself for godliness. I communicated as I did yesterday because I understand the fervor that surrounds, warfare and politics. We have the midterms. We have all these things swirling around us. But I communicated as I did to simply remind us, man, that God rules and reigns in the affairs of men. And we must not allow the fervor surrounding the events that are percolating on the world stage right now to encroach upon our proper perspective concerning who we are and whose we are. This is why I am urging prayer specifically for our nation's leaders. Prayer for the Church of the Living God in our nation, because this is a pivotal time in our nation's history. There are forces that are pulling against one another, and this is a critical, very, very critical juncture that I really believe that what happens in our nation in this juncture will set the course for what transpires in the next years and decades that follow. We should not look winkingly at how the Lord had garnered the attention of our nation and how hundreds of millions of people heard the gospel at Charlie Kirk's funeral, and look at the things that are unfolded in our nation thereafter. And now we have the war in Iran, Operation Epic Fury. The people of God must approach this season on our faces, man.
A Discipleship Minute with Joseph Parker.
I was recently in conversation with another pastor, and we were discussing the issue of some of the news stories about youth in our culture and nation. The pastor remarked, "I've been praying and asking the Lord for what to do about all that's going on with our youth. Without question, we're wise to pray and ask for wisdom in addressing most any problem in our world. God and His Word always have an answer for every challenge we can possibly face. The answer to the challenges we face with our youth isn't complicated. In fact, the answer is much more simple than we may wish to admit. The answer to the problems in our culture for all that's going on amongst our youth is Jesus. Our children need to know Jesus Christ, and our children and youth need to be discipled in their faith. They need to be taught and trained to read the Word of God and walk in its wisdom."
Here's today's Dr. Dobson Minute with Dr. James Dobson.
Athletic events can be healthy for kids, but parents sometimes place too much emphasis on competition. How many times have you heard this phrase at a Little League game or a soccer match? Okay, guys, if you do your best and win today, it's pizza for everybody. But what message is being sent to impressionable youngsters who do their best and still lose? Now, there's nothing wrong with healthy competition, and of course, kids should be encouraged to participate in various physical activities. But when mom and dad vicariously live through their youngsters, they model poor sportsmanship at every turn. The result is that physical and emotional benefits of participating in a sport can be outweighed by the damage done to the child's self-esteem and his outlook on life. That is too high a price to pay.
For more information, visit drdobsonminute.org.
The following is a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt, and it stressed me out. But what I thought was a solution turned out to be a problem. I kept hearing ads about debt settlement that seemed too good to be true. And actually, it was. When I called, they told me to stop paying my bills. That didn't sound right to me at all, so I hung up. Later, I found out that debt settlement is bad, real bad. Then I learned that there is a right way to pay off your credit cards. It's called a debt management program from the great team at Trinity. Trinity had a plan. In the end, I paid off my bills, I saved thousands, and I even improved my credit score.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Heather. Please forget debt settlement and remember Trinity Debt Management.
1-800-788-1813.
Shining light into the darkness. This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner. Abraham Hamilton III here. Oh man, you probably can tell I have a cautiously optimistic yet pensive disposition because of all of the things that are happening, and there's lots of information coming in, and updates are coming in rapidly, quickly, and so there's a lot going on. Let me take a few moments now to mention March 27th through the 29th. I will be joining several others at the Kingdom Come Conference. This will be in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The conference is being hosted at Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. This is a church that was founded by the late D. James Kennedy. And this is, a conference that I'm really, really, really looking forward to. Primarily because I want to hear some of the other people who will be presenting. But in addition to hearing them, I really believe that this is a time where God is allowing His message to be conveyed with a clarity and with an urgency to keep the main thing the main thing. I'm honored to be speaking at a conference where Os Guinness will be presenting, Rosaria Butterfield will be presenting, David Bonson will be presenting, many others will be there. If you're in the area or you're able to come to the area in Florida, because I get a lot of Floridians, hey, when you coming over here? Well, here we go. Later this month, we're only a few weeks away from that now, March 27th through the 29th. The subtitle for the conference is Kingdom Citizenship. What is it? What does the scripture require for those of us who are citizens of the eternal kingdom of God, who have also been blessed to be citizens of the United States of America? What does God require of us in this moment? It's going to be an amazing time. If you're in the area, I'd love to see you there, willing to come to the area. You're welcome to attend this conference. It's going to be an amazing time. Pastor Rob Pacienzia is hosting it. He is the host of the conference. We'll also record some things while we're there. It's going to be a great time. All right. Some of you might have seen this information. Some of you may not have seen this information, but U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff seemed to confirm some of the things I was sharing with you guys before. What I shared with you yesterday, one thing in particular was the offer from the United States of America to provide low-level nuclear fuel to the Iranian regime in negotiations, to which the Iranians flat rejected. And in fact, Special Envoy Witkoff shared some insider information because he and Jared Kushner were the persons negotiating on behalf of the United States of America with the Iranians through the representatives in Oman, through the leadership in Oman. And Steve Witkoff, this is amazing. This is amazing to learn. This is amazing to learn what I was trying to say. But according to Representative to Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, the Iranians began the negotiations. I mean, literally to set the frame for the conversation by basically bragging somewhat proudly about the fact that they still had, and you're going to hear him say this in his own words, 460 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, enough to make 11 nuclear bombs, and were somewhat proud of the fact that they had been able to evade all kinds of checks and accountability efforts, and even saying that they had access to this. And they're saying this, that these words weren't the words used, but saying this even following Operation Midnight Hammer, was almost proud of the fact that, yeah, by the way, we have this. I want you to hear Steve Witkoff in his own words. Listen to and watch. It's clip number 4, clip 4. Go.
And let me say this, because I forgot this small little detail. In that first meeting, both the Iranian negotiators said to us directly, with no shame, that they controlled 460 kilograms of 60%, and they're aware that that could make 11 nuclear bombs, and that was the beginning of their negotiating stance. So they were proud of it. They were proud that they had evaded all sorts of oversight protocols to get to a place where they could deliver 11 nuclear bombs.
What? What? And look, that's the exact question I had, Pastor Carl. Why would they say that? Now, anybody who's ever done any negotiations, in negotiations, you often want to frame the negotiation. If this is true, and Steve Witkoff went on to explain that the Iranians did this to frame the negotiations on their behalf, to basically convey that any efforts to negotiate a deal that perpetually precluded the Iranians, and this is so funny. The Iranians intentionally chose their terminology. They said, according to Steve Witkoff, they said to him that we, the Iranians, have an inalienable right to enrich uranium to whatever levels we desire. They sought to adopt the language of our Declaration of Independence to convey to the U.S. delegation just how committed they were to maintaining their capacity to enrich uranium. Now, just as I said yesterday, and I took my time to display clear objectives, because there's so many people honestly lying that are saying, well, there's no clear objectives. There are objectives. If you disagree with it, just say you disagree with it, but don't say they don't exist and they have not been articulated with clarity, repeatedly. Similarly, with this statement by Steve Witkoff, you can say you don't believe the statement. That's fine. But you cannot deny that Steve Witkoff was one of the people who President Trump tasked with negotiating on behalf of the United States with the Iranians. Steve Witkoff is saying that they told him to start their negotiations. And to our credit, we had subsequent meetings with the Iranians following this. But it was apparent to Steve Witkoff, who was joined by Jared Kushner following that meeting, that, this is not going to go how we would like this to go. Now, again, you can say you don't believe the statement was made. That's perfectly fine. But if this is true, that the Iranian delegation began the negotiations by referring to, in a somewhat proud manner, their ability to skirt any efforts to hold them accountable, to keep them from doing what they want to do, in an effort to show, hey, we're going to do it. And y'all thought that what you did with your bunker busters with Operation Midnight Hammer was going to keep us from doing what we're going to do. We still have enough for 11 bombs right now. So we just going to start this party off saying that right off the gate. If that is true, how would that impact your perception of Operation Epic Fury? The president has said he sent the special envoy and the U.S. delegation to see whether or not the Iranians were willing to negotiate. The purposes of the negotiations were to keep the Iranians from getting a nuclear weapon and to limit, as I said yesterday, Raising Cane said it, limit Iran's ability to project strength beyond its borders. The projection of strength beyond its national borders includes nuclear capacities, yes, but also conventional ballistic capacity. The Iranians, in the years following the Islamic Revolution, they have used bullying their neighbors around to kind of gain momentum in that region for a long time. If that is true, that they came in the door saying, by the way, all the stuff that y'all been doing, all of the sanctions, all of the sanctioning, all of the things that have been going on, all of the espionage, all of the efforts to stop us from doing it, none of those things have been effective to keep us from doing what we want to do, because we have an inalienable right. We have an inalienable right to pursue enriched uranium, specifically for weaponization purposes. This is our right. To which I want to find the exact quote, because there was a response to that inalienable right comment that I had in my stack. Where is that? There is that. Yes. Yes. To which Witkoff responds, the United States has an inalienable right to stop you dead in your tracks. That is very interesting. And according to Witkoff, with that opening salvo from the Iranians, both he and Jared Kushner look at each other and make eye contact, and they realized this is going to be a lot more challenging than we thought it would be. Now, that man, I'm telling you, that's some delusion, man. To come in a meeting and that's how you're going to start it. So now, you probably have seen President Trump has been posting on social media, the Iranians want to talk now. Now they want to negotiate. To which President Trump has said, too late. Time for talking is over. We tried to talk. You guys came in blustering. Again, if this is true, you guys came in blustering, saying that this is a non-negotiable, that you're not going to allow any effort to kind of get you off the path of enriching uranium. You're not going to allow any diminishing of your ballistic capacity. All right. Then here we go. The regime that shouted death to America to death to Israel, we know how that panned out. And they know now. There ain't no 72 virgins waiting on them, by the way. They know now. They know now. And it just goes to show you as well, man, like, why would you perceive something like that as being a reward if you're trying to be a moral upstanding? Anyway, I'm not even getting into debating that right now, but like, you're moral and upstanding, and this is your reward. Hedonism is your reward. Anyway, moving right along. So we know we have reports that the top 49 Iranian officials, including the former Ayatollah, were all deleted in the earliest salvo from Operation Epic Fury. Then we get reports today that Iran's senior leadership, the senior clerics were gathering. They gathered in their assembly of experts in a building in Qom. I might not be pronouncing the city's name properly, right outside near Tehran. And they were gathering to select the next Ayatollah. and Israel knew exactly where they were meeting and when they were meeting. And you want to know what happened? Listen to and watch clip number 5. Clip 5. Go.
But we are turning now to some breaking news that we wanted to share with you as it pertains to Iran. Putting this up on your screen here, this is from Fox News. We're learning Israeli forces struck an Iranian Supreme Council gathering today as the group was meeting to choose a successor to the late Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, a senior Israeli official telling this to Fox News. We also do know Fox News' Trey Yingst reported the update live on Fox this morning as well, saying the move, quote, speaks to the Israeli intelligence about this war. Yingst went on to say they just targeted the meeting in Tehran, where what's left of the leadership was gathering to choose a new supreme leader. And there's that post there from Trey Yingst.
At the very time that they were tallying the votes for the next Ayatollah. That is wild, man. That is wild. Not only for the mission precision and execution capacity, but even for the statement. For the statement. No. You don't understand. We will not abide another apocalyptic jihadist to be the leader of the Persian people. This, I got it, man. That is, while they are tallying the votes for the next Ayatollah, and that is remarkable to consider, man. That is remarkable to consider while it's happening, and it's remarkable how that's happening. I'm gonna share a story. I'm getting close to this break. Maybe I'll start it now. I'll go into it. When you see the depth of the expertise that is involved and the intelligence gathering operations and the collaborative work between the United States of America and Israel and the Mossad in particular, man, it is remarkable. So I'll start this now. We now have reports, because you have the joint efforts by the U.S. and Israel. We have reports that Mossad operatives hacked into Tehran's traffic camera network to spy on the former Ayatollah and other top Iranian officials. And they have been doing this for years. The Mossad agent says, I'm so familiar with Tehran, I know Tehran just as well as I know Jerusalem. I'll go more into the details of this report. This is mind-blowing to learn of these capacities, which is why it's also just ridiculous for the Iranians to show up and say, hey, by the way, we're going to start this meeting off by saying we were able to skirt all of the sanctions, all this other stuff, because we have an inalienable right to enrich uranium to our heart's content.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildman and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
What Jesus said was, when these signs begin, they will fulfill themselves within a generation. When you see these signs, if you're living at that time, you will see the coming of Jesus Christ when these signs are full blown.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series, Where Do We Go From Here? Next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Jeffrey Epstein. This is David Wheaton, host of The Christian Worldview. Convicted pedophile and financier Jeffrey Epstein died in jail in 2019, but the recent release of government files on him has sent shockwaves around the world. The King of England's brother has been arrested, and former President Bill Clinton has been questioned, to name just two of the many. But there is far more than debauchery here on a private Caribbean island. Epstein was connected with the most elite globalists that seek to rule the world in rebellion against God. While earthly justice for all involved is unclear, the Bible says God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. Hear our most recent program on Jeffrey Epstein at thechristianworldview.org, and then tune in this weekend for another topic that will sharpen your worldview.
Listen to The Christian Worldview with David Wheaton, Saturday mornings at 8 Central on American Family Radio.
It all came down to the ultrasound, and I saw this little lima bean looking thing with a halo, which I thought was incredible.
A baby wasn't really in the plan for this young mom. Even after seeing a halo on her baby on ultrasound at a preborn network clinic, she was still leaning toward abortion.
And I got to hear the heartbeat, and I got chills. In that moment, I just felt God's arms come around me and hug me and tell me that it was going to be okay.
But after meeting her baby on ultrasound, she chose life.
My choice to become a mom and hear those little footsteps running down the hallway every morning is all because I had an ultrasound. It saved my life and hers.
To find out more about Preborn's life-saving work, visit preborn.com/AFR. That's preborn.com/AFR. Your love can save a life.
AFA Action takes attacks on the family seriously. The enemies of the family constantly employ new tactics to try to sneak past our radar. They know if we stand together, their evil plans will fail. Your gift to AFA Action allows us to stay vigilant against their onslaught. And if you give this month, you'll receive access to the Cultural Institute video, When Your Faith is Illegal, by Frank Harbor on AFA Stream as our thanks. You can make your gift today at afaaction.net.
The Hamilton Quarter podcast and one-minute commentaries are available at afr.net. Back to the Hamilton Quarter on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner. Abraham Hamilton III here. So what I was explaining, the Mossad was able to hack Tehran's traffic camera network to spy on the Ayatollah, the former Ayatollah, and his bodyguards and other top Iranian officials. But here's the thing, and people need to understand this. The traffic camera network was set up by the Iranians initially to spy on their own citizens. So the Mossad didn't create the spy the spy network via the cameras. They hacked the network that the Iranians established to spy on their own citizens. So by hacking into the traffic camera network, the Mossad gave Israel access to nearly every camera in the city of Tehran. And Israel used this for years, guys, to gather intelligence, to learn the movements of the top Iranian officials, to learn where they parked their cars when they went to Khomeini's compound, where they did things. They said one camera angle proved especially helpful because it allowed the agents to track where the bodyguards parked their personal cars when they arrived at the Supreme Leader's compound on Pasteur Street in the heart of Tehran. This is remarkable, guys. I mean, when you consider this type of capacity, and with the pagers to the terrorists, and guys, this is another level. This is another level, and so they worked that combined with the CIA having assets on the ground to confirm in person that they're all in the room. And that led to that is just remarkable to consider, man. That is remarkable to consider. Now, as I said yesterday, we're still early on in this process. I am hopeful, and I'm not fearful, not because of anybody's practical, technical expertise and skill, because my faith is in the Lord, but I'm also cautious. And as I said yesterday, anybody who says they knew for a fact what will happen going forward, that's just not true. That's not true. It would be, in my view, a glaring failure if the leadership in Iran returns to apocalyptic, Shia, demonically inspired annihilationists. That would be exceedingly problematic. And I know for a fact, not based on anybody's opinions or anybody's conjecture, based on activity, I know for a fact Israel believes that same thing. That is why they took out the candidates to be the next Ayatollah, you know. So, you know, it's prayerful consideration. You know, there's some who take issue with the explanations from the administration. I have no reason to doubt what's being reported to us. I know for almost 50 years, the Iranians have shouted death to America. So when Marco Rubio says that, well, if a strike, see, we learned that a strike was imminent, and we know that the Iranians would immediately take aim at our people. I don't have any reason to doubt that. And another thing that we need to be aware of, and I haven't spent as much time talking about this yet, but I plan to in the next few days, when you see the retaliations from the Iranians, notice that they are taking aim at population centers, civilian population centers. They're hitting hotels and let me just make it easy. The type of places, if that was Israel, you'd have people going to the UN talk about genocide. You get what I'm saying? But it's amazing that, you know, you have these people firing off missiles and things, aiming them and hitting hotels. And as Secretary Marco Rubio said, and this is a weakened Iran. This is how a weakened Iran responds. Can you imagine if they were not as weakened? All right, I'm going to pivot away from the international issues for a moment. And discuss some domestic things. Yesterday, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the Mirabelli versus Bonta case out of California. Honestly, guys, I'm sick to my stomach that a case like this has to make it all the way to the Supreme Court. And I guess I cover this stuff enough that this stuff shouldn't still affect me the way that it does, but it's further evidence of what I'm saying about the various forces within our own country that are pulling at the seams at our own country. So in 2024, California's governor, Gavinito Mussolini, signed A Bill 1955. AB, Assembly Bill 1955. This is a bill, among other things, that made it illegal. Hear me well, guys. Made it illegal for school officials, administrators, and teachers to inform parents if they learned that a child made a heterodox sexual identity claim or claimed to be transgender. AB 1955 made it illegal. You hear what I'm saying? Made it illegal for a teacher to tell the child's parents. Now imagine you're a teacher and you have a 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old comes up to you and tells you, you know what, I no longer identify as a boy, I'm a girl. And the law passed by the state legislature, signed by the governor, says you can't tell that child's parent. Yep. That's what the law said, y'all. That's what the law said. Parents got attorneys to sue the state of California, and among the relief they sought was injunctive relief. An injunction is a preliminary interruption of the law going into effect because the litigants will say, no, this is such a serious matter that we have to keep this from going into effect, because if this law is allowed to take effect and is later deemed to be unconstitutional, the damage that it will do is irreparable. You know, the kind of damage like a young girl who cut off healthy tissue, that kind of damage. So the parents sued, and said, no, this law needs to be enjoined, which means it needs to be stopped from going into effect. The lower court granted the injunction. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed the injunction to say, no, we can let the law go into effect. You can still bring your lawsuit, but the law needs to be able to continue to play out. We won't stop this. And so the Supreme Court accepted the appeal, the emergency appeal, to say, no, this needs to be heard. Because the potential of this could be an emergency. In a 6-3 decision, and I really have no stomach for the fact that you have 3 people on the highest court in our country who would say, nah, that's not an emergency. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court overturned the Ninth Circuit's decision to allow the law to take effect. Listen to and watch clip number 3. Clip 3. Go.
The ruling comes after religious parents and educators represented by the Thomas More Society challenged California school policies aimed at preventing staff from disclosing a student's gender identity. That decision temporarily blocks for now a state law that bans automatic parental notification requirements if students change their pronouns or gender expression at school. The Thomas More Society called the decision a major victory for parents, saying the court found California's policy likely violates constitutional rights. Professor Erwin Chemerinsky with UC Berkeley School of Law says this is an emergency ruling.
This law is now put on hold, so what it means is that schools can require that teachers and other staff inform parents about the gender identity or gender pronouns of children.
It's funny hearing Erwin Chemerinsky because he wrote at least one of my textbooks for law school. That's right, sister. And Lord help us. How are there 3 Supreme Court justices, and you have Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is a mother herself, right? Elena Kagan doesn't have any children, I don't believe. And does Sotomayor have any children? I don't believe she doesn't have any children either. So that may help us get a little bit more insight as to why they might not find this to be as much of an emergency. Now, I want to say something categorically, because this is technically and legally true, that this only applies to the injunction. So the case is still being litigated on the merits. But this pertains only to the emergency status of the injunction. The Supreme Court said, yes, this is an emergency. If you allow a state to prohibit school teachers and administrators and officials, and by the way, there were teachers in California that sought to join the parents in the lawsuit because they said, we don't want to be bound by a law that says if a child comes to me telling me that they're sexually confused, that I can't call their parents, I can't tell their parents. Guys, this is insane. This is insane. And Gavinito Mussolini signed that with not a hesitation. I am grateful that sanity prevailed at the Supreme Court, but I am simultaneously grieved that we have an entire state legislature that will have a bill that goes through the process. And you have all of these elected officials in California. Yeah, I think this is a good idea. Yeah, a child comes out. They don't need to tell their parents. And then, we need to pass a law that makes it illegal for the school officials to tell their parents. Guys, think about that. It would have been illegal, according to California state law, for the teacher to tell the parent, hey, Johnny came to school today and he told me that all the children need to call him Jenny. You could not, guys, that's insane. That's just insane. In the majority opinion, it was a per curiam opinion, the court stated, quote, the parents who assert a free exercise claim have sincere religious beliefs about sex and gender, and they feel a religious obligation to raise their children in accordance with those beliefs. California's policies violate those beliefs. Justice Elena Kagan, who I will reiterate, who does not have any children, She said, quote, if nothing else, and she was one of the dissenters. So she's one of the ones who thought California should be allowed to put this law into place to keep teachers and administrators at schools, at public schools in California, from being able to tell the parents if their child comes to school confused. Elena Kagan says, quote, if nothing else, this court owes it to a sovereign state to avoid throwing over its policies in a slapdash way. If the court can provide normal procedures, and throwing over a state's policy is what the court does today. Elena Kagan, excuse me, ma'am, have several seats. Have several seats. Guys, this is another reason why I'm saying we need to be vigilant in crying out to the Lord and being obedient to him. Because yes, by God's grace, my wife and I, we are discipling our children from our home. But I got neighbors, man. I care what's happening with my neighbors. Guys, that's evil. That's straight out of the Marxist playbook, to sever the bond between parents and children. And you have a recent, modern Gavinito Mussolini example of their willingness to do so, all in the name of ideological fidelity. Man, that's evil. That is evil. And yet I have to come here and say, and by the way, this is a temporary phenomenon concerning this law, because there is still litigation concerning the law itself, the merits of the law. This Supreme Court action only applies to the emergency status of the injunction. And yet in the highest court in our country, we have 3 people with lifetime tenure who don't see the necessity of parents being the ones who determine such foundational and formational realities for their own children, like their identities. This is the pulling at the seams that I'm talking about. Some of you listening to me right now saying, how could you get a majority in 2 houses of a legislature to pass something like this? How could you get a governor who would sign something like this? How could you get 3 Supreme Court justices to say, you know what, we should have leave this in place? You know how, guys? Romans 1 explains it to us. When people reject God, we become futile in our reasoning. We start to call down up and up down. We call good evil and evil good. And those who would fight against the evil, the scripture says they make themselves a prey, because the wicked folk seeks to pursue. Guys, we must remain diligent and vigilant in these times. Prayer is the order of the day.